Now, he may have been a thorn in the side of the SNP at times, but few could deny that Jim Sillars is one of the grandees of Scottish nationalism. He's a former deputy leader of the party and has for decades been one of the most powerful voices arguing for independence. He was highly critical of the current SNP ahead of its conference last week and set Nicola Sturgeon a set of goals to get things back on track. But did she and the SNP succeed? Well, Mr. Sillars is here to tell us. Well, first of all, Jim Sillars, you called Nicola Sturgeon's demand for a second independence referendum in the wake of the Brexit vote a monumental political misjudgment. Have they done enough, do you think, to row back?
Well, it was, because, we lost 6 seats at Holyrood and we lost 21 seats at Westminster because the day after the referendum, she went helter-skelter for a second referendum, which everyone knew, A, we would lose, and most people didn't want. I liked the idea that she produced of a standalone, publicly owned energy company. But I don't think, and this is constructive criticism, I don't think that goes far enough. Because what we require in Scotland is actually an energy corporation that gets us into the oil industry, that gets us into the fracking gas industry, as well as the renewables industry, so that we not only deliver cheap energy, but we actually make a profit from doing so for the public purse.
OK, I want to ask you about fracking in a moment, but let's just come back to the specific question of the independence referendum. Have they put that to bed? Because the policy still seems to be, we kind of won't have one, but we kind of will.
Oh, look, I'm for a second independence referendum, but you cannot actually have one sensibly until you know exactly what the Brexit deal is in detail, and then take time to assess it, and then take time to actually formulate an argument for independence. Because that we're in a new paradigm. What was in 2014 will no longer be the case when we Brexit. So we have to have a new thinking of the structure which we put to the Scottish people. There's a huge amount of thinking and discussing what to be done.
Realistically, in terms of when you could have one, you're talking after the next Scottish elections in 2020.
Oh, I think after that you're probably 22, 23 before you actually have the referendum. Of course, we've got a problem, because if the SNP don't get, if there's not an independence majority in Holyrood in 2021, how do we extract the agreement from Westminster to hold a referendum? And that's a problem for the whole movement, which we've got to sit down and say, what do we do?
You think it would be better to face that one head on than go ahead with a referendum before then and risk losing it?
Oh, I think until we've done our homework. Right, Gordon, we lost in 2014, and there are reasons why we lost. There has been no post-mortem inside the Yes movement. Now, what are the answers? Why did we lose, and what are the answers to it? And until we do that, and until we engage in a major educational exercise with the Scottish population, we will lose the second referendum. At the moment, we're still stuck around about 46%. Why have we not moved up to around about 60? And that's the task that faces the independence movement at the present time. And we're nowhere near even at the starting gate.
You have also said recently that the independence movement should distance itself from the SNP. The problem with that argument is that there isn't really an independence movement apart from the SNP.
Oh, yes, there is. What happened in 2014 was a spontaneous rising of people who organised themselves into their own little branches all over the place.
But that's dissipated now.
Yes, we allowed, that was one of my criticisms. We allowed that to die. That has to be resurrected.
But who is going to resurrect an independence movement independent of the SNP?
Well, the SNP will always be part of the independence movement. But my argument is you cannot allow it to become the gaffer of the independence movement, and therefore the movement is tied to the electoral prospects of the SNP. If they go down, the movement goes down.
So what do you do?
I don't have the answers. At the moment, what I'm saying to people in the independence movement is we've got to sit down and work out the various scenarios. What happens if we build the independence movement, but the SNP doesn't have a majority at Holyrood to demand a referendum? How do we cope with that? That's a major intellectual exercise we haven't even started. I don't have the answer, but I do know I've got the questions.
You also suggested Nicola Sturgeon was a bit out of her depth and lacked political nous, I think was the phrase you used. Is she the woman to keep leading the SNP and the independence movement?
Well, she's the only one we've got at the present time, I think. If you look around, suppose Nicola was knocked over by a bus, this afternoon. Where are the candidates of the necessary stature to take over the leadership of the SNP? So she's what we've got at the present time. And I would like to see her improve. And I think the way for her to improve is actually very much widen the circle.
Talk about damning with faint praise.
Well, I'm at my age, I can talk honestly, because I'm not after.
But what you seem to be suggesting, if there was somebody better around, she should go and let them in.
Well, if there was someone better around who had the intellectual capability to understand that you've got to analyse things first before you take a decision, yes, I think she should step aside. But there's no one there at the moment. So we've got Nicola, and I hope Nicola improves. For example, we have 118,000 members in the SNP, no policy groups. Policy comes out of Nicola's office, and if it doesn't come out of that office, it doesn't come out. Now, in that 118,000 members, we must have an abundance of talent right across the social and economic spectrum. That's got to be tapped. And if she widens that area of discussion, then I think she will emerge a much better person than she is at the moment in political terms.
Now, just to take one area of policy which is proving a problem for the SNP, education, she, in effect, staked her first ministership on reducing the attainment gap in education between the better off and the less better off. A very honourable aim, perhaps. But was it wise to stake your first ministership on something which is going to be extremely difficult to demonstrate that you've actually made any difference to?
The reason it's going to be extremely difficult, not just to demonstrate, but actually to achieve, is that the major problem, part of the problem, but the major part of the problem lies on the other side of the school gates. We've got about a third of our people living in poverty. About a quarter of our children are living in poverty. Teachers inside the school are then dealing with children who are not inspired the way someone is, who goes to a private school.
But just on the politics, was it wise to stake your reputation?
I don't think anyone should stake their reputation on a single thing. The general conduct of the government is what you are going to be judged on. And unless Nicola can solve the problem beyond the school gates of poverty, and bear in mind, she doesn't have all the levers necessary to do that, then we will struggle inside the school gates.
I did an interview with Kenny McCaskill on radio, which was broadcast this morning. In that, he says that he worries that the SNP is losing the respect of the business world. I don't know whether that's something you've got a view on.
I'm not... I don't have many connections with the business world, so I really can't say whether that's the case or not. That is the sort of Tory PR that's being punted out at the present time. I don't know whether that's true or not.
Fracking. You suggested the other day, we should explain to people that you're in favour of fracking and you think the decision to ban it was wrong. But you suggested that you might consider taking action. What did you mean?
No, I think the Scottish public didn't really know that there was a major consultation going on, which allowed the Green movement to ramp up the sort of 99% against fracking. Joe Stalin used to get figures like that as well. What I've been trying to say to people is, look, time to wake up. Trade unionists should wake up. You should be getting resolutions at the Scottish TUC demanding a rethink. Poverty groups in Scotland should be demanding a rethink by this government. We're in the ridiculous position of having about 900,000 people living in fuel poverty. At the same time, we are taking frack gas from the United States across to Grangemouth when we might have sufficient frack gas under our feet to deliver cheap energy to poor people.
So when you said you were considering taking action, you meant a campaign. You didn't mean you were thinking of legal action.
Oh, not me. No. I mean, I don't have the means to take legal action.
Right, Luke, let's end by going back to your youth and the days before you set up the Scottish Labour Party. If the Labour Party had been run by Jeremy Corbyn at that time, would you have stayed in it?
No, there was no great problem with the Labour Party being socialist when I left it. I left it over the question of its position on Scotland. What I do think about the Corbyn position, based on the Socialist Manifesto last time, is that across the Central Belt, where the big debate is going to take place at the next election, Corbyn Labour Party, and led by Leonard in Scotland, will pose a major problem for the SNP in terms of left policies. They are to the left of the SNP, and I can't see the SNP at the moment, I hope I'm going to be wrong in the future, I can't see them at the moment outflanking the Corbyn Labour Party in the Central Belt.
Would you vote Labour?
No, I'm an SNP member.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Jim Sillars, thank you very much indeed.